Every civilization believes its money is different, that its currency will hold, its numbers will mean something, its system is too modern to fail. But every illusion of permanence ends the same way, quietly at first, then all at once. One morning, prices double before lunch. By evening, savings that took decades to build can't buy a loaf of bread. And by nightfall, the paper everyone trusted becomes nothing more than ink and lies. People stare at banknotes that once symbolized safety, now just scraps of memory. Markets freeze. Shops lock their doors. Families trade watches for rice, jewelry for fuel, anything real for anything edible, because that's the moment paper money dies. Not when the government says so, but when the people stop believing. It has happened before. It will happen again. And when it does, the question isn't how much your money is worth. It's what it ever meant at all. Paper money was never wealth. It was a story, a promise printed in ink, passed from hand to hand until the story became belief. For centuries, people have mistaken that belief for reality. They see the numbers, the colors, the signatures, and think, this is value. But it isn't. It's a mirror held up to something else. Land, labor, grain, gold, trust. And when the reflection fades, the mirror shatters. That's the first truth economies forget. Value isn't created by paper, it's created by confidence. And confidence is the most fragile commodity ever invented. Every era has built its temples to this illusion. The marble banks of Renaissance Florence, the stock exchanges of London and New York, the glowing towers of the digital age. Different shapes, same faith. People bow before ledgers now instead of altars, but the prayers haven't changed. We call the printing of money stimulus. We call the erosion of value inflation. But strip away the language, and all that's left is the same quiet panic. What happens when the story stops working? Because money isn't destroyed by fire or war. It dies when people stop believing the promise it represents. That's when zeros turn into smoke, and a lifetime of effort dissolves into nothing more than paper and memory. The symbol outlives the substance for a while. Governments insist the system is strong. Markets pretend stability, and we nod along because disbelief feels dangerous. But deep down, we know. You can't print faith. When the printing press outpaces production, when the story outgrows the truth. Collapse has already begun. It just hasn't been announced yet. And that's why history is merciless to the complacent. The illusion of value always feels safest right before it breaks. Germany, 1923. The war was over, but the peace was poison. Factories stood idle, debts piled like mountains, and the printing press became the only machine that still worked overtime. At first, it felt harmless. A few more marks to keep business moving, to feed the families who had sacrificed so much. But each new note was a whisper of panic disguised as policy. By the summer of 1923, the whisper had become a roar. Prices no longer rose by the month or the week. They changed by the hour. A loaf of bread cost a few hundred marks at breakfast, 1,000 by lunch, and 1,000,000 before dinner. People carried money in wheelbarrows and counted their salaries in kilos of paper. Children played with bundles of notes because to their parents, those notes had become toys, colorful, worthless remnants of a vanished promise. Savings disappeared first, then trust, then dignity. Doctors, teachers, engineers, the entire middle class, saw decades of work erased in a season. And in that void, something darker moved in, anger looking for someone to blame. Hyperinflation is not just an economic event, it is a spiritual collapse. The moment a nation realizes its own promises have no meaning. When paper became cheaper than firewood, people stopped believing in numbers altogether. They bartered for food, paid rent in soap and coal, and traded wedding rings for bread. In the streets of Berlin, posters hung not to advertise products, but to announce that tomorrow's price would be 10 times today's. Yet a few survived with their fortunes intact. They were the ones who held something real. Foreign currency, gold, land, or goods that could feed people when money couldn't. They didn't outsmart the collapse. They simply recognized that trust was dead and moved to what was alive. And from that ruin rose a generation that no longer believed in the old order at all. Out of the ashes of paper came a new faith, in power, not promises, Because when money fails, people don't just lose wealth. They lose the story that held their world together. Every collapse begins with good intentions. In the early 2000s, Zimbabwe's leaders promised prosperity, land for the people, justice for the past, and wealth born from independence. But history doesn't reward promises. It rewards discipline. And when emotion replaces economics, paper becomes ash. The seeds were planted decades earlier. When Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980, it inherited a stable currency, the Zimbabwean dollar, once worth more than the US dollar. It was a symbol of national pride, printed with Victoria Falls, wildlife, and sunlight bursting over the savannah. But by the early 2000s, land reform had turned violent. Farms that fed the nation were seized, production collapsed, and the economy began to suffocate. To cover the shortfall, the government printed money, not to build, but to survive. At first, the illusion worked. Salaries rose on paper, markets buzzed, people felt rich, but the shelves grew emptier and the bills thicker. By 2006, the printing presses roared day and night, sheets of bright new dollars carrying the scent of ink and desperation. By 2008, a single loaf of bread cost billions. People needed backpacks to buy lunch, wheelbarrows to buy groceries, $1 trillion for a single chicken. The tragedy wasn't just inflation, it was betrayal. Pensioners who had worked for 40 years watched their life savings dissolve into confetti. Teachers and doctors were paid in paper that lost half its value before they could reach the market. Families lined up for hours to buy cooking oil, only to find the shelves bare. Money lost meaning, and with it, dignity vanished too. But look closer, and you'll see something remarkable: the resilience of ordinary people. When paper failed, barter returned. Haircuts for maize meal, fuel for medicine, rent in US dollars, cigarettes or soap. People built an economy from fragments, trading trust when trust in currency was gone. For a time, even the American dollar became a kind of lifeline, a reminder that stability was possible somewhere, if not at home. The government eventually gave up. The Zimbabwean dollar, once proud, now a joke, was abandoned. Citizens carried wallets stuffed with currencies from half a dozen nations. Official inflation hit 79.6 billion%, and still, people endured. They planted gardens, sold tomatoes, crossed borders to trade. Paper failed, but people did not. The lesson was ancient and brutal. When governments destroy the value of money, they destroy the trust that binds a society. And when that trust dies, money becomes just another broken promise. We saw it in Weimar. We saw it in France. Zimbabwe was not an exception. Only the next chapter in the same story: the collapse of paper, the triumph of reality. Because no matter the century or the continent, one truth endures: you can print money. You cannot print value. We used to measure money by what it was: gold, silver, something you could touch. Now, it's measured by what it represents: digits on a screen, pixels of promise. In the 2020s, we entered a new illusion, the illusion of control through technology. Central banks printed trillions, not with ink but with keystrokes. Numbers appeared on balance sheets as easily as breath fogs a mirror. People cheered the stimulus, markets soared, but the oldest law of economics still whispered beneath the noise: when you make more of something, each one is worth less. And so prices began to rise, not just for bread or fuel, but for everything that once felt stable: housing, healthcare, hope. Digital convenience had hidden an ancient cost. Meanwhile, a new kind of money appeared: cryptocurrency, born from distrust. It promised freedom from printing presses and politics, a modern gold in a digital vault. But even that dream was tested. Bubbles inflated, exchanges collapsed, and greed proved as timeless as inflation itself. The irony is painful and poetic. We built systems to escape the old mistakes, and yet we carried the same human flaw into every code: the belief that we could outsmart scarcity. From Rome's silver to Bitcoin's blockchain, the pattern remains. When trust replaces value, collapse is only ever a click away. Every generation believes its money is smarter. Every age thinks it's immune to the mistakes that broke the ones before it. But history doesn't punish ignorance. It punishes pride. Rome thought silver could stretch forever. France thought paper could replace faith. Argentina thought dollars could anchor dreams. And now we think data can outlast doubt. But money, no matter its form, always obeys the same laws. Trust, scarcity, and discipline. Break any one of them, and collapse follows like gravity. Technology can disguise decay, algorithms can delay consequence, but no system can outcode human nature, greed, fear, and denial. They've survived every upgrade. History's survivors understood something deeper than finance. They learned that protection doesn't come from prediction, but from preparation. The farmer with land, the craftsman with skill, the saver who owned what others only promised. Every collapse leaves two kinds of people: those waiting for things to go back to normal, and those who realize that normal never comes back. It's replaced, rebuilt, redefined. That's the hardest truth history offers, and the only one that actually saves you. Because if the past was written in gold and paper, the future is being written in code. Digital currencies, programmable money, systems where every transaction, every breath of value is tracked, approved, and, one day, controlled. It's the dream of perfect order and the seed of perfect control. We've seen this story before. Empires once built monuments to eternity, and every one of them became ruins. What happens when trust itself becomes digital, when value lives in servers instead of hands, when your access to money depends on permission, not possession? That's where the next chapter begins. And history, patient, ruthless, and exacting, is already waiting to write the ending.